John Gill, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11. Exposition of the entire Bible. Reading the verse first in the King James. Quote, "Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also ye do." Unquote. John Gill, quote, "Wherefore comfort yourselves together, either with the doctrine of the resurrection of the dead, the second coming of Christ, and the thoughts of being forever with him and one another, and so may be a repetition of the advice in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 18, or with this consideration that they were not in a state of darkness, ignorancy, and infidelity, but were children of the light and of the day, being called out of darkness into marvelous light, and should enjoy the light of life, and with the doctrine of predestination, they being appointed not to the wrath that were deserving of, but to be possessed of salvation by Jesus Christ, of which they could never fail, since the purpose of God according to election always stands sure, not upon the foot of works, but upon his own sovereign and unchangeable grace, or with the doctrine of Christ's sufferings and death in their room instead, whereby the law was fulfilled, justice satisfied, their sins atoned for, pardon procured, and everlasting righteousness brought in, and their salvation fully accomplished. Things the apostle had spoken of in the context, the words will bear to be rendered. Exhort one another. That is, not to sleep as do others, or indulge themselves in sin and sloth, but to be sober and upon their watch and guard, and in a posture of defense against the enemy, to put on the whole armor of God, and particularly the plate of faith and love, and for an helmet the hope of salvation. And edify one another by praying together, conversing with each other about the doctrines of the gospel and the dealings of God with their souls, abstaining from all corrupt communication which has a tendency to hurt each other's principles or practices, or to stir up wrath and contention, attending only to those things which are for the use of edifying, whereby their souls may be more and more built upon Christ and their most holy faith, and be a rising edifice and grown up into a holy temple in the Lord, and for a habitation of God through the Spirit, even as also ye do, which is said of their commendation, and not through flattery, but to encourage them to go on in this way, and from whence it may be observed that mutual consolation, exhortation, and edification are things the saints should be stirred up to frequently, even though they are regarded by them, and much more than should these be pressed upon them who are careless and negligent of them." Unquote. Reading the verse again in the King James Bible, quote, "Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as ye also ye do." Unquote. End of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11.